The receptionist scanned my invitation, and Daphne Keller laughed before the screen even finished loading. She stood beside Caleb Monroe in a cream dress that looked expensive enough to make a point, one hand resting near his sleeve like she had earned the right to guard him from people like me. Caleb glanced at my badge, then at the young woman behind the check-in table, and his smile sharpened just enough to hurt. "Brianna always did know how to make an entrance," he said, soft enough to sound polite and loud enough for Daphne to enjoy it. For half a second, I thought the scanner had rejected me. Austin hospitality events were full of tiny mistakes. Misspelled names, swapped badges, sponsors added late, guests moved without warning. Then the receptionist stopped smiling. Her eyes dropped back to the screen, widened slightly, and she leaned closer as if the answer had changed while she was looking at it. Daphne's laugh faded first, and Caleb's followed a breath later, because the silence coming from that table no longer belonged to me. The receptionist picked up the phone without asking me to step aside. "Just a moment. Ma'am," she murmured, and that one word made Caleb's jaw move like he had swallowed something bitter. Daphne tilted her head, still trying to recover the room with charm, and offered, "I'm sure it's just a list issue, because Brianna isn't with our party." I looked at her hand near Caleb's sleeve and remembered when that same hand used to hold mine across break room tables after double shifts. I did not answer, because the screen had already said more than I needed to. Owen Price came out from the ballroom entrance with a folded program in his hand and urgency in his face. He did not look at Caleb first. He looked straight at me, reached for my hand, and said, "Brianna Westbrook. Thank God. Russell Grant has been asking if you arrived." Behind him, the doors opened wide enough for warm light and low conversation to spill into the lobby. And for the first time that night, Caleb Monroe had no sentence ready. 3 years before Owen Price said my name like it belonged in that room, Caleb Monroe and I lived in a one-bedroom apartment off South Lamar with a dishwasher that groaned every night. We were engaged, tired, and proud of ordinary things. Paid bills, clean sheets, takeout still warm when one of us came home late. Caleb was already chasing better titles and bigger rooms, and I was building guest standards after long shifts, writing down what worked when a customer was angry, when a server was embarrassed, when a manager wanted the problem gone fast. I wrote those steps at our kitchen table because real service was never about sounding polished. It was about saving trust before it left the building. Most nights, Caleb sat beside me with his laptop open, watching me turn messy service problems into language a team could actually use under pressure. He would read one line, lean back, and smile like he had just found the sentence he needed for his own future. "I could not say it like this without you. Brie," he used to say, and back then it sounded like love because he still kissed my forehead after midnight. I believed him because the person taking from you rarely looks like a thief while he is thanking you for the gift. Daphne Keller knew that table almost as well as Caleb did. She had been my closest friend since our Dallas restaurant days. When we worked double shifts, split fries after closing, and promised we would never leave each other behind for better invitations. I told her about the manual before I ever sent it to Russell Grant, and she laughed into her iced coffee, saying, "Put your name on every page, because men remember help once it makes them look smart." Then she met Caleb at a tasting event, and somewhere between shared rides, private jokes, and his need to be admired, her warning started turning into distance. The first clean copy still had my name in the footer, my notes in the margins, and an email thread to Russell with the subject guest recovery draft. First clean version. Caleb had seen it before anyone called it valuable, and Daphne had heard me read the weakest sentences before I fixed them. So when she stood at that check-in table acting like I did not belong, the hurt was not old love coming back. It was proof that both of them remembered where the work came from and had chosen to stand somewhere else anyway. Owen led me through the ballroom doors, and the sound changed around me before I found a place to breathe. Inside, the dinner had settled into Austen confidence. Linen napkins, low laughter, men pretending they had not checked every name tag in the room. Russell Grant rose from a center table when he saw me, silver hair combed back, wearing the careful look he used when a room needed to understand without being lectured. "There you are," he murmured, taking both my hands, and the people nearest him turned because Russell did not greet anyone like that unless their work had mattered. He introduced me as the person who built the service recovery system his restaurants had used for almost 3 years. Not helped with, not polished, not inspired. Built. A woman from a hill country resort asked how I trained managers to calm a complaint before it became a review, and a hotel operations director leaned in before I finished answering. Across the room, Caleb stood with a drink he had not touched, watching the conversation move around him like water finding a cleaner path. Daphne caught on faster than he did. She smiled when people looked her way, but her thumb kept moving over her phone, and every few seconds her eyes went back to my badge. I saw her angle the screen away from Caleb as if she could still fix whatever had gone wrong at check-in. When Marissa Ford passed behind her with a tablet, Daphne's shoulders tightened, and that small movement told me the guest list had not changed itself. Caleb stepped into Russell's circle later, offering a smooth, "Good to see you again, Russell," like they were equals in a conversation already open to him. Russell gave him a nod polite enough to pass, then turned back to me and asked whether the Austen team had adopted the apology before refund sequence. It was a simple question, but Caleb heard what I heard. My name was no longer attached to his story, and his title was not enough to pull it back. By the time dessert plates reached the tables, I understood why Caleb had come to Austen with that careful smile. He was not just attending a leadership dinner or shaking hands for another title. The next morning, he was scheduled to present a partnership model between his boutique hotel group and the private dining club where Daphne managed events and member relationships. If the room liked it, Caleb would become the face of a guest trust program. Daphne would become the woman who helped bring hospitality culture into it, and the alliance would have a clean success story to hand its sponsors. The problem was that the model did not begin with Caleb. It began in my notes. In the manual I wrote after years of watching real service fail in quiet ways that never made a headline. Daphne knew that, even if she had trained herself not to say it out loud. She had seen the old pages, heard the examples, and watched Caleb borrow my language first as practice, then as confidence, then as ownership. Somewhere along the way, she had decided the past was easier to carry if she called it shared history instead of stolen credit. Marissa Ford found the first match while reviewing speaker materials for the morning program. She was not looking for trouble, only checking claims before sponsor names were attached to them. One example in Caleb's deck stopped her cold because it described a wet coat, a folded receipt, and the apology before the refund in the same order my manual did. That detail was too specific to be industry language, and when she pulled Russell Grant's licensed copy from the event file, my name sat in the footer like a quiet witness. I learned later that Marissa took the documents straight to Owen Price. She did not call it drama, and Owen did not treat it like a personal fight. He asked for the contract, the email thread, the first clean version, and the speaker certification Caleb had signed when he submitted the deck. Russell gave them everything without raising his voice. By the time Caleb lifted his glass across the ballroom and smiled like tomorrow already belonged to him, the only thing still missing was his own mouth saying the work was his. The next morning, Caleb walked into the panel room like a man stepping into a room he had already won. His suit was navy, his smile practiced, his badge turned forward so no one missed the title beneath his name. Daphne sat 2 rows from the front, one ankle tucked behind the other, her expression polished but thinner than it had been the night before. I took my seat near Russell, and when he slid a paper folder onto his lap without opening it, I knew the room was no longer just listening. Caleb began warm, almost humble. thanking the Alliance, the sponsors, and the private dining club for believing in a new standard of guest trust. We all know hospitality is not about perfection, he told the room. It is about what happens after something goes wrong. Heads nodded. Pens moved. And Daphne let herself smile when he mentioned the partnership as a bridge between boutique hotels and private dining culture. Then he said, "This method came from years of my own field work." And I felt the sentence land in my chest before anyone else knew it mattered. He moved through the first module smoothly, talking about listening before correcting, apologizing before refunding, and returning dignity before asking for loyalty. Those phrases had lived in my drafts before they lived in his mouth. Then Caleb told the story of a guest arriving with a wet coat after her reservation had been mishandled, folding the receipt in half because she was too upset to look at the total. I remembered writing that detail after a real shift. Remembered the rain, the manager's panic, and the exact sentence I used to teach a team that the apology had to come before the refund. For a moment, I did not feel angry. I felt cold, because he was not stealing an idea in the abstract. He was standing in front of a room full of adults and retelling my work history as his character. Russell did not move, but his thumb pressed once against the edge of the folder. Owen Price watched Caleb with a face so neutral it made the air tighter. Caleb kept going because confidence had always been his favorite shelter. I developed this framework through trial, failure, and a lot of listening, he added, and Daphne's smile disappeared so slowly it looked like something being erased. Across the aisle, Marissa Ford lowered her eyes to her tablet, then looked toward Owen. Caleb was still speaking, still polished, still certain the room belonged to him, while every specific word he chose made the folder in Russell's lap heavier. When Caleb finished, a few people started clapping, but Owen Price did not stand with them. He stayed seated for one breath too long, then rose with the folded program in his hand, and the sound thinned by itself. Caleb smiled like he was waiting for the first clean compliment of the morning. "Before we move into questions," Owen began, "we need to clarify one authorship matter related to the framework just presented." Caleb kept his smile in place, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Of course," he answered, still warm, still careful, because sounding calm had always been the first room he entered. Owen looked at the notes Marissa had placed in front of him and continued, "You certified this model as your original field-based work when you submitted your speaker materials." Caleb nodded once. "That is correct." "Yes." Owen turned one page. "Then can you explain why the same module order, the same guest example, and the same closing language appear in a licensed training manual submitted under Brianna Westbrook's name before your proposal existed?" The room did not erupt. It tightened. Caleb blinked, then reached for the only excuse left. Hospitality borrows from shared experience, and a lot of us use similar language because the problems are similar. Russell opened the folder on his lap. "Not this similar," he said, and his voice was low enough that people leaned in instead of looking away. He placed the contract, the email thread, and the first clean version beside Owen. Each page marked with dates Caleb could not soften. Marissa added, "The source file in Mr. Grant's event record includes Ms. Westbrook's footer, revision notes, and the wet coat example in the same sequence." Caleb looked at me then, not angry yet, just exposed. Daphne moved before he did. One careful breath, one hand closing around her phone. "This feels like a misunderstanding," she managed, but the word came out thinner than it had sounded at check-in. Marissa glanced at her tablet. "There is also a credential change tied to Ms. Keller's event access account, lowering Ms. Westbrook from verified guest to general attendee after the approved list was finalized." Daphne's face emptied, and Caleb turned toward her so fast the room understood she had not been standing outside the problem. Owen closed the program with both hands, until this is reviewed. The partnership announcement will not proceed under the current authorship claim. Caleb still had the same badge, suit, and title, but the room no longer believed them the same way. The room emptied in the slow, careful way people leave when they do not want to be seen choosing a side. No one crowded Caleb, and no one argued with Owen. But the space around Caleb widened as if every chair had learned something. A sponsor representative walked past him with a tight nod and went straight to Owen. I heard only one sentence clearly. "We will not attach our name to an authorship claim under review." And Caleb's face changed like the sentence had weight. His company did not fire him in that room. Real consequences rarely arrive that clean. They asked him to step out of the partnership review while internal leadership examined the speaker certification, the proposal history, and the materials he had submitted as his own. For a man who lived on access, the punishment began with doors staying politely closed. Every person who had wanted 5 minutes with him that morning suddenly needed to check their calendar. Daphne's fallout was quieter and sharper. The private dining club pulled her from sponsor-facing dinners until they reviewed why her event access account had changed my credential after the approved list was finalized. She did not lose her position because she loved the wrong man. She lost the room because she used a professional key to help lower another woman's name at the door. When someone from the club touched her elbow and murmured, "We need you to come with us," Daphne looked at me once, and for the first time, there was no practiced softness left. Marissa stayed near Owen with her tablet against her chest, pale but steady, while Russell closed his folder like a man finished with an unpleasant bill. Owen thanked him for the documentation, and Russell only nodded toward me. "She built it," he said. Simple as a receipt. That was the part Caleb could not take back. Not the applause, not the title, not the morning program. Just one plain sentence in a room full of people who now knew exactly whose work had carried him. I found Caleb in the hotel hallway before he found the courage to call my name. He stood near the glass doors with his phone in one hand and the old panic in his face. The kind that only appeared when charm stopped working. "Brianna, can we talk for a second?" he breathed. And I knew from the way he looked past me toward the ballroom that he was not asking about my pain. He was asking about the damage. I let him speak because there was nothing left in his voice that could surprise me. He said the review would ruin the partnership, that Russell respected me. That one sentence from me could frame this as a misunderstanding instead of a claim problem. "You know how these rooms work, Bri," he said, almost pleading now. "People hear one bad word and they never forget it." I looked at the badge on his jacket, the one he had been so proud to wear, and asked, "If Marissa had not found the file, would you have put my name back on it?" Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it, and that silence was cleaner than any confession he could have offered. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell him he had destroyed me, because he had not. He had only taken years from a woman who learned how to build without asking him to return them. I told him the review was not mine to stop, and his face folded in a way that looked almost like grief until I understood it was fear. When he whispered, "I am sorry, Brianna," I accepted it because I was done carrying words he should have said before they became useful to him. Daphne called later. After the club had pulled her from the sponsor dinners, and after Caleb had stopped answering her messages long enough for the truth to settle. She said she did not know he had used that much, and I told her she knew enough to change my access. That was the last full sentence I ever gave her. Months later, my training program launched under my name. Russell introduced me without adding anyone else's shadow, and I moved into a quiet place with morning light over Austin. The man I love now reads my drafts and asks how large my name should be on the cover. And every time, I remember that peace can feel like winning when nobody has to lose for you to keep it.